So let's just get to it. Why have I been gone so long? Why have I disappeared from social media? Well, I'll give you the short version first, and then you can skip ahead to the next section if you like. Well, I got cancer, and I had to get my left kidney and my left adrenal gland removed, and I am currently on immunotherapy. That's the short version. So back in January, I started getting this horrible chest pain, and I seriously thought I was having a heart attack. So after 3 days of suffering from this excruciating pain, I called my daughter, and she and her boyfriend came and took me at 2 a.m. to the infamous Indian hospital here in Phoenix. Trust me, the Indian hospital is another episode. It's another whole story in itself, especially for those that are familiar with it. Anyways, the doctors at first could not figure out what was wrong with me. I had a blood pressure reading of 167/94, and I've never had that in my life. I used to run up to like 10 miles a day and lift every other day. So I kind of know my baseline, and I knew something was off. And so they did EKG, blood work, x-rays, the whole gamut, and nothing. So the ER doctor decided at the last minute to order a CT scan just to see if I might have a pulmonary embolism, which also came back negative. However, the scan caught the tip of something sitting on the top of my left kidney, which turned out to be a tumor. The doctors all said it was luck, and I know it was providence, because the scan was only supposed to catch my lungs and my heart. And this is where the story gets really strange. This wasn't your average size tumor. Most tumors are, relatively speaking, usually the size of a dime or a quarter. Well, this tumor was 10.5 centimeters. Basically, this tumor was the same size as my kidney, or about the size of a really large lemon, and it was cancerous. So fast forward a couple of weeks later, and they removed my left kidney and my left adrenal gland, and I was up and around the next day and discharged after 3 days, and I felt fine for the first 6 weeks post-surgery, just your typical soreness from all the incisions, but otherwise I was fine. And then about week 6, my body just started crashing. The doctors really don't know what happened, but they're leaning towards adrenal failure or adrenal fatigue. I don't think my body handled only having one adrenal gland, and it started just shutting down, going into reserve energy mode. And I was in severe pain for 2.5 to 3 months. And it was like my nervous system was shutting down, and I had just enough energy each day to go from the bedroom to the living room and pretty much sleep all day. And I had some of the worst headaches I've ever had in my life, and I don't ever get headaches. But what was worse was that there was times when it got so bad that I couldn't even talk, because it felt like speaking was overloading my nervous system and taking away from other motor functions and burning what precious little battery energy I had left. And at times it felt like I could just close my eyes and easily slip into a coma or unconsciousness. That's how bad it was. Anywho, it wasn't until around the end of April, beginning of May, that I started slowly feeling better. And each day I felt like I was regaining my energy levels back. And as you can see, I got through it, or I hope I got through it. However, when it comes to cancer, I hit the jackpot because my type of cancer apparently has a high chance of coming back. You know what's crazy? And I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but I must have been tested 15 to 20 times in the past 2 years for COVID, and I never got vaccinated, and I never caught COVID. Knock on wood. And this is not a dig at anyone. This is my own lived experience. But I was telling a buddy of mine recently that I'm immune to COVID. My body completely rejects COVID. It just chooses instead to catch cancer. I even said to another buddy of mine, you know that, what did I say? You know that real men only have one kidney? Top that. Anyways, because of the possibility of cancer coming back, I've started immunotherapy, which lasts for 1 year. It's not chemo or radiation. It's a boosting of the immune system, but there are definitely side effects, some really bad. But I wanted to create this part of the video to thank those people, and it was a small handful of people who knew about this. My family, my friends, my ex-coworkers, and a small group of people on social media. And I just want to say to all of you, thank you so much for your kindness, for your prayers, and for reaching out to me when I was at my lowest. It means so much to me. Thank you so much. Now, I am going to continue producing content. Of course, everything will depend upon my health, but I actually can't wait to get back in the saddle again and get videos out. With that being said, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video. So I'm actually not sure how to start this because I'm going to burn a lot of things to the ground and probably offend a great deal of people and possibly lose subscribers. So let's just go for it. I'm coming for both sides of the political aisle. I'm coming for the neoliberal, progressive, leftist, globalist, overeducated elites and the establishment and the neoconservatives and the warmongers on both sides of the aisle. And I'm going to use every ounce of intellectual ammunition that I have at my disposal to completely tear these worldviews to pieces. I've sat at home recovering for almost 6 months now and held my tongue and watched and listened as the cathedral has gone from one crisis to another, and every step of the way has attempted to justify the erosion and destruction of freedom. And I'm going to take this channel right to the edge of the algorithm. And if native liberty gets kicked off of YouTube, so be it. I'll just post on another platform. Now, some might be thinking that attacking both sides is the worst possible path someone could take to grow a channel. And that may be true, but for me, it's really simple and always has been. And it comes down to morality, the moral law. As someone who is a Christian means that I must apply the moral law equally to both sides. No president and no political party is exempt. Now, get ready to have your minds blown because it does not matter to me if someone has been issued a government costume, possesses a bright and shiny badge, wears a sleek credential laminate, or won the Electoral College, or has a fancy degree from Harvard. None of these things absolve them nor me from the moral law, nor do these things grant ipso facto wisdom or authority. Now, what I really want to do with this channel is to try and highlight certain historical events, historical figures, and important schools of thought, and help recover and spread some of the true masterpieces of scholarly work that has either been forgotten or that a great majority of people have simply never been exposed to, especially for those who only get their information from the establishment's official lines of communication. Which brings me to my first target, which is progressivism. Right now, I'm working on an outline on the origins, intellectual roots, the history, and dark side of the ideology of progressivism, and how progressivism's lineage has more in common with and has more in line with the Jacobin ideas that went into and came out of the French Revolution rather than the American Revolution. And these two revolutions are not the same. And I know that this is going to sound offensive, but the history of American progressivism is a repudiation of the uniquely American experiment in liberty, which at the time of this country's founding was a rejection of the European model of governance, which was ruled by an elite upper echelon of aristocratic rulers and the rejection of an expert class of moral busybodies. The American model explicitly rejected the idea of officialdom, this idea that a managerial class of bureaucrats and technocrats through the administrative and regulatory state could best run your life, keep you safe, protect you, provide for you, and safeguard you against disinformation. Yet the progressive worldview not only embraces this inferior type of governance, but runs headlong into it with open arms in complete ignorance of the countless historical examples of the complete failure of this type of model and how quickly it devolves into tyranny. And this may be news to some progressives, but one of the peculiarities of progressivism, especially a branch that developed in America, the Yankee version, owes its genesis more to a rejection of, as well as an inversion of, religious belief, specifically Christian belief. Even one of progressivism's core beliefs, its sine qua non, is this idea of the inevitability of progress, which, strictly speaking, is not only a perversion of theological belief, but is also at the same time a full-orbed competing eschatology. In addition to this, there are also major contradictions, both philosophical and ethical, that sit at the very core of progressivism, which I believe actually undermines the entire ideological system itself. Now, what I'm about to say should not be taken in an absolute sense because, of course, there are outliers and exceptions to the rule. But one of the key characteristics that I have stumbled across is that many on the left, many of the people who call themselves progressive, don't just misinterpret history, they don't know history. And this is not hyperbole. I truly believe that this is a key characteristic that defines and distinguishes the left as the left. And it's not just that many on the left don't know history, it's that they tend to glory in their ignorance of it. And the reason I say this is not to be malicious, but because learning from history tends to discourage the urge to re-implement ideas that have already been tried and failed in the past, which is a key feature of the left. And this unique trait of an ahistorical outlook is, I believe, perfectly exemplified and captured in the left's failure to understand basic economics. Many on the left view economics not as a set of established laws, but as mere suggestions that can be overridden through political fiat, free from any economic repercussion, which is one of the reasons for why we are at where we are at today, economically speaking. Violating the laws of economics is the same as violating the laws of physics, except the consequences may not be immediately seen or felt, but there is always a price to pay. One cannot whisk away economic reality, no matter how virtuous one's beliefs makes them feel about themselves. Now, my other beef with progressivism and or leftism in general is its understanding of human nature. Its anthropology, its most rudimentary starting point, is fundamentally wrong, which means its conclusions are no better than the faulty premises it is based upon. I have so much more to say about this. I have the receipts, but I'll save it for a future video. Again, this is just a taste of what I'm working on. I'm also working on a series of videos that is going to be critiquing the concept of implicit bias, which is a belief that is not only omnipresent today, but is also accepted by one side of the political aisle, namely the left, as an article of faith, which forces me to ask why. So what I want to do in order to answer this question is to not only expose some of the problematic features of this concept, including its definitional, philosophical, measurable, and replicable problems, but also the assumptions that lie underneath this concept, which many in the field of social psychology simply take for granted. Now, this next section is going to be a flamethrower of a section, because I'm probably going to burn some bridges here, but I want to expose in a future video at least two men on the right who I believe have done immense amounts of damage to our culture, and that is none other than Leo Strauss and William F. Buckley. One was an academic Gnostic, a true Machiavellian scholar who said one thing in public and another in private, and was one of the architects behind the rise of the Jacobin neo-conservative ideology. And the other one sold out the principled conservatism of the old right and brought us an interventionist and imperialistic foreign policy at complete odds with the founders of this country, and violated time and time again the moral tenets of the jus ad bellum tradition, and helped to usher in the military-industrial complex and the perpetual warfare state in which we live today. And I have to say this, what happened to the left? Where are you? What happened to the historic anti-war left? I'm a Gen Xer, so I remember vividly the left's anti-war stance against the war in Iraq. What happened to you? Where did you go?
What happened? Your balls drop off?
I actually have a real simple theory on this, that the left sold its soul to corporate media so that whatever this news agency says is now taken as the gospel truth by the left, without question or reflection. There is no more independent thinking on the left, and above all, no moral courage, because everyone I encounter on the left simply repeats the talking points of this network now. Now, getting back to what I was saying before I went off on this tangent, the reason why I am so thoroughly opposed to neocon ideology, which is what the left has become, is because of its glorification of total war as some sort of conduit for personal and or national greatness, which is not only a pagan vice, but is the exact opposite of Christian agape love and peace. And since I'm burning so many bridges, I might as well keep going. The fact that so many people who call themselves conservative and yet know nothing at all about the old right, in my opinion, is a tragedy, because the old right was unflinching in their anti-war, anti-imperialistic stance, relentless in their hatred of Leviathan government, and principled defenders of freedom. I'm speaking about such figures as John T. Flynn, Garrett Garrett, H.L. Mencken, Albert J. Nock, Rose Walder Lane, and Frank Chodorow. These guys were the counter opposite of today's fickle conservatism. And this may shock some conservatives, but conservative history did not begin with William F. Buckley. And I'll just say this in passing, which is going to offend even more people. If you think this guy represents the height of conservative thinking, or that these books represent the cutting edge of conservative thought, then please allow me to dissuade you of such erroneous views in the future. The actual depth of real conservative thought is actually pretty amazing, and I want to bring back into the discussion, as part of my mission, such intellectual powerhouses as Edmund Burke, Russell Kirk, Richard Weaver, Michael Oakeshott, M. Stanton Evans, Felix Morley, Robert Nisbet, Roger Scruton, and Nicholas Gomez Davila. Now, do I agree with everything these people wrote? No. As someone who is a libertarian, I grow extremely tired of the law and order, authoritarian type conservatives. However, my disagreements with these deep thinkers forces me to become a better thinker, which is something I cannot say about many leaders of the conservative right today. I'm also working on a series of videos on the work of the philosophers of science, such as Willard Van Quine, F.A. Hayek, Karl Popper, Michael Polanyi, Thomas Kuhn, Imre Lakatos, Paul Feyerabend, and Herbert Butterfield, just to name a few. Now, the reason why I want to focus on these men is because they showed, each in their own unique way, how knowledge, especially within the sciences and within academia, is formed. The assumptions that scientists bring to the table, the dirty politics behind science, how saving the phenomena can sometimes take precedence over truth, how reputation building and institutional protection can foster mediocrity, risk aversion, and obstruct counterfactual evidence, and how knowledge itself comes embedded within a particular paradigm, within a particular model of the world, within a non-neutral worldview, and how the all too human sciences actually work, contrary to all of our naive 7th grade understanding of the scientific method, which is more myth than reality. What these men showed is that there is a lot more that goes on behind the scenes within the sciences than just evidentiary-based testing or Baconian inductive reasoning. Not knowing the work of these philosophers of science and their brilliant insights is something I'm also going to try to rectify with this channel. Now, once again, do I agree with everything these men said? No, I disagree with Thomas Kuhn and Paul Feyerabend vehemently when they swing too far towards what I see as epistemic relativism. Now, some might be thinking, what is the relevance of their work? Why study something that happened over half a century ago? Well, the relevance of their work is that it completely obliterates this naive view of science, that science is whatever the experts say it is, free from any setbacks, false starts, dead ends, erroneous conclusions, or subjective and institutional biases. In short, the work of these men exposes the dangerous epistemological naivete of those who give obsequious deference to the so-called expert class. Now, I'm going to say something that is based around their work and apply it to a contemporary issue of ours, and I am aware that my comments are a little bit late to the party, but I have a strong feeling that we haven't seen the last of this issue yet, and this may come across as extremely incendiary, but it needs to be said, which is this. If anyone out there is still in favor of implementing some sort of mandatory forced vaccinations across this country, regardless of individual autonomy, and is not familiar with the work of these men and the long track record of abject historical failures of one-size-fits-all top-down government programs, and is not aware of the replication crisis occurring right now in the sciences, and has not learned anything from the most recent big pharma scandal, the opioid crisis, then you have no right to speak. You have not done the homework and are historically illiterate. Let me just clarify. You have the right to speak. That's not what I'm saying. That's not in question. But you do not have the authority. You know not what you speak because you know not history. And to really drive this point home, and I don't mean to come across as mean-spirited. That's not who I am. But if you are being honest with yourself, truly honest, and are still holding to this belief, then please ask yourself this question. Are you simply repeating the talking points of your favorite news network? If so, this means that you didn't arrive at this conclusion independently, but because of the effectiveness of the cathedral's messaging, a manufactured form of consent. I say this because not only is the work of these giants in the philosophy of science still extremely relevant, but also because most of their conclusions and ideas were learned straight from the historical demise of what is known as logical positivism, which is another era in our history we fail to know to our detriment. And I have to say this. It amazes me how many people I encounter, especially on the left, who repeat the doctrines of logical positivism, especially the verification principle that scientific knowledge is the only valid form of knowledge, without even realizing that this particular view of knowledge was refuted over half a century ago. Not only was this view of knowledge eviscerated by these philosophers of science, but it was internally destroyed from within. The logical positivists themselves, the so-called experts of their day, could not justify their own starting point. This epic failure of the school of logical positivism should, in the very least, serve as a valuable reminder that the so-called expert class can get it wrong, royally wrong, not just for years or for decades, but for centuries. And I'll say this and keep saying it. Failure to know history, failure to know this episode in our history, which ties in with my criticism of the left, is to be easily led astray by the establishment's narrative. I'm passionate about this because these are serious issues. I lost my job because of this. And sometimes the only way to pierce belief systems is to argue with firm conviction, history, evidence, logic, and with a smile. Please understand, I am not arguing against getting vaccinated. I'm not. That should be left up to the individual. I'm only arguing against any form of mandatory compliance. Now, this example is exactly what I mean and others mean when we say together as a chorus that your favorite cable news channel is gaslighting you. These issues are far more complex than the one-sided superficial analysis that these networks present. Now, I urge everyone to please go back and rewatch this video. And if I made a mistake, then please show me. But I can almost guarantee that most of the stuff I just covered in this video is new to most people and might possibly be things that someone has never even been exposed to or heard of. And to be as transparent as possible, one of my motivations for making this video is based upon an ancient warning that is found in an ancient text, which says, "My people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge." I pray that that not be us. Now, I want to bring this to a close by circling back to where I began, which was critiquing the ideology of progressivism, and give one last reason for why I reject the theologically perverse doctrine of progress. This vulgar eschatology is because only Christianity is inevitable. If that offends you, so be it, because I don't really care about the world's standards, which is the ultimate establishment. I have so much more to say, but I will save it for the future, God willing. Now, I want to close by riffing off something that I heard a while ago and put my own twist on it. So you may have already heard something similar. If your ideas, opinions, and your beliefs match that of the media, big tech, big pharma, Washington, D.C., the military-industrial complex, academia, and Hollywood, then maybe, quite possibly, you are not part of the Rebel Alliance, but instead part of the empire.